And wonderful to see you all. I'm excited to continue our learning. And I just want to do a little bit of a review of what we covered last week, just a 5-minute review, because it's kind of we need a running start over here. So last week, and if you have the book, the Path of the Just from the Ramchal, we're using this version here. If you don't have the book, I suggest you order it. This particular version is definitely the one that we're going to want to have. And on page 22, where he begins, he starts off by talking about a person's mission in this world. And we pointed out last week that this book is about building and planting, that to learn how to build ourselves internally and how to plant within ourselves the holiness and the spark that we're all yearning for so much. And he right away begins by talking about ma chavato ba'olamo. What are a person's obligations in this world? And it's an interesting place to start, but he talks about, that's where he starts. He starts by talking about what we're supposed to be doing here. What's the purpose of our life? And he says that we need to clarify, and that means intellectually, by speaking to people, by consulting, by researching, by studying, and then internalize, that means bring it inside of ourselves, make it a part of who we are. Ma chovato ba'olamo. What am I doing here? What is my purpose? Why am I here? What am I supposed to accomplish in this amount of time that I have on this earth? My life is not random. There's something that I was put here to do, and I need to figure out exactly what it is and work on that. And that was the main idea at the very beginning, the very first sentence, about understanding and internalizing that mission. And then once I've clarified that mission, so I mentioned the power of a mission statement that Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto over here, is advocating that every person should know, not only be aware of what they're supposed to be doing here, but have total command of it and have it be front and center in their mind at all times, so that everything that they do, all of their efforts, all of their work and all their investment of time and energy should be working ultimately towards that goal. That doesn't mean that a person should never take a break. That doesn't mean a person can never have a vacation. But ultimately, we have to know why we're here, and we have to be fully bought in and committed to being able to fulfill that purpose and accomplish what we're here to do. And I mentioned this idea that Stephen Covey talks about in the 7 Habits, which is actually habit number 2, which is to start with the end in mind. And that's a very Jewish idea. Start with the end in mind. First, get clarity and internalize why I'm here, what I'm supposed to be doing here, what my purpose is, what my mission is. And then I can put everything that I have in towards that. Because otherwise, we stand the chance of working very hard, climbing the ladder, to use a metaphor. But then when we get towards the top, we might find out that ladder is propped up against the building, not the building that I intended to climb or that I needed to climb in the first place. So it's not only important to work hard and to climb the ladder, but it's most important to know what the building is that we want to climb, where we want to get to in life. And then once we have that clarity, then we said you can start working on it and climbing the ladder. So we talked about that. And then we spoke about being fully committed and going all in and being willing to toil. That word, that 4-letter word that so many of us, including me, have such an aversion to. Toil. It means working hard towards the goal. It means pushing myself. Once I know what I'm doing here and why I'm here and what I'm supposed to be accomplishing, then I have to work hard. I have to put in the effort. I can't be afraid. I can't be afraid of the work. I have to be willing to go beyond the comfort zone and to make sure that I commit myself to my purpose and my mission in life. So that's what we spoke about. And then we kind of concluded with this idea of toiling. So that was like the quick review from what we did last week. And now we can jump in to the second sentence over here, which is on page 23. And the Ramchal, he starts off with this very, very beautiful passage over here. I'm going to read it in Hebrew. I'm going to translate it, and then we're going to break it down. So the paragraph starts like this. V'hine, ma shehoronu chachamim zichron lebracha. Mentioned that we all have a unique purpose and a unique mission in this world, but the sages, the rabbis, the sages of blessed memory have taught us that in addition to our unique purpose, our unique mission, there's also a general purpose for what human beings were created for what we were put on this earth to do. And he's going to discuss that. Now, as a little bit of a disclaimer, I just want to say that when we talk about why God created the world or why God created human beings, it's important to know that the real answer to that is, who knows? Beats me. We have no clue. We have no way of knowing, because there's no way for us to really understand. We can't know God in his essence. We can't understand the will of God, the purpose, the intention, why Hashem does what he does. All we could talk about is from our perspective, or from the perspective that we're meant to have. From our angle, what is the reason why God created the world? And the question really begins with a fundamental philosophical question, which is that God has no needs. One of the definitions of Hashem in being perfect, in being whole, in being complete, is that God has no needs. There's nothing about God that is lacking. So normally if I make something, let's say I make dinner tonight. The reason why I made dinner tonight is because I'm hungry. I have a need. I'm missing something, right? Or if I build a bookshelf in my study, it's because I'm missing that. I don't have a bookshelf. I need to build and create a bookshelf so I have somewhere to put my books. But Hashem has no needs. He's missing nothing. He's lacking nothing. So if he creates something, it begs the question, why would Hashem create anything if he lacks nothing? So the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, the author of our book, as I mentioned in the introduction, wrote many, many, many books. One of the books he wrote, which maybe we'll study one day as well, is called The Derech Hashem, The Way of God. I would say it's a toss-up between this book and that particular book, which is his most popular, most well-known book. It's either this one or that one. But in the Derech Hashem, in the way of God, he answers this question. He addresses this question: why did God create the world in the first place? And he says something which is a little bit hard to understand, but I'll give it to you on a simple level. And the idea is like this. The terminology in Hebrew, in Kabbalistic language, is Mechok HaTov Hu Lahetiv. And what that means basically is that the nature of good is that good bestows goodness. What does that mean? It means that by definition, the definition of something being good is that good bestows goodness. It grants goodness. It gives goodness to something else. Now, if Hashem is Tov, the ultimate Tov, the ultimate good, that means that by definition, there needs to be something that exists other than God in order for there to be a recipient of the Tov, of the goodness that God not wants to grant, but that God by definition grants because he is good, because Hashem is the ultimate good. So what are we doing here? What are we human beings doing here? Human beings, the world in general and human beings in particular are the recipient of Hashem's true good. We're put in this world, we're here in this world to receive, to be the recipients of good. And this good is not just any good. It's not just, decent good. It's the ultimate good. It's Hashem's goodness. We are all here, every one of us, and everyone that you've ever met in your life is here to be the recipient of infinite goodness. What is that infinite goodness? The Ramchal explains also in the way of God, in the Derech Hashem, that the ultimate goodness is the ability to have a relationship with, to be connected to Hashem himself, the infinite source of existence. Okay, so why did Hashem create the world? Because goodness bestows goodness. and there needs to be a recipient to receive the goodness. What is the ultimate goodness? The ultimate goodness is connection to or relationship with the source of infinite good, which is which is Hashem himself. Okay, which explains a lot of fundamental things in Judaism. For one, and we've talked about this a million times, but it's always good to review it. One is this is the fundamental reason why human beings must always have free will. The one thing that almost never happens, and I say almost because there are exceptions, for example, Pharaoh, but we won't get into the exceptions now, but there's almost, for one thing that almost never happens, is Hashem almost never takes away our free will. Okay, which is one of the reasons why there's so much evil in this world, why there's so much darkness in this world, because human beings utilizing their free will can and do make really, really horrible, evil choices that causes terrible, terrible suffering for large numbers of people. And even though that's the case, and even though God knows that human beings are going to use our free will negatively to harm and to destroy, still Hashem does not take our free will away, almost ever. And the reason for that is because it would undermine the purpose of existence. Because the purpose of it is a relationship with Hashem. And a relationship can only be a relationship if it's a result of choice, right? In other words, as we always say, if I put a gun to your head and say, you pick on somebody, Bonnie, you're always fun to pick on. Bonnie, tell me you're my best friend and you love me or else, right? Guns to your head. Okay. See, Bonnie just said, I'm her best friend and she loves me. Well, that doesn't really represent such a meaningful relationship, because what choice did she have other than to tell me that she loves me and I'm her best friend, right? So in order for there to be a relationship, there has to be the ability to choose to have the relationship or to choose not to have the relationship. And that requires human beings having free will. Well, the downside of human beings having free will is that often human beings are going to use their free will to make bad choices that are going to cause harm and destruction in the world. But Hashem doesn't take that away, because we're here for that ultimate good. Okay, now let's take a look at what the Ramchal says. He says like this: V'hine, now, what our sages of blessed memory have taught us is Sheha Adam lo nivra ella his aneg al Hashem, that humankind was created only for the purpose of taking delight in Hashem, v'lehanos miziv shechinaso, and to benefit from the radiance of his Shekhinah, of his divine presence. Okay? We are here to receive pleasure. My Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Noach Weinberg of blessed memory, may have told you this, I may have forgot to tell you this. He lived this book. When I tell you he lived this book, I mean he lived this book. He once took off 6 months from yeshiva, allegedly. It's a legend, but we don't know for sure. But the legend is that he took 6 months off from his Talmudic studies to do nothing other than study this book day and night, day and night, day and night for 6 months. He embodied it. He lived it. And everything he taught and everything he built and everything he created, Esha Torah, was all built from this book. So he used to say, and this was a great recruitment technique also for a new potential Balei Tshuva, for a new potential, adherence to, religious observance. He used to say that Judaism is all about pleasure, all about pleasure. I'm smiling because Marilyn's son and I were in Esha Torah at the same time together. I remember we heard these lectures together and we drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, together. But it was so powerful, and it's still so powerful, and it's so true that Rav Noach used to say, we're here for pleasure. That's why we're here. We're here to receive pleasure. Hashem created us for one reason and one reason alone, and that is to be a recipient of his good, which is infinite good, which is infinite pleasure. And it sounds great. We're here for pleasure. And it is great. But now our job then, what Noach used to say, is to go out and figure out where the real pleasures are, because not all pleasures are created equally. That's what he used to say. Not all pleasures are created equal. Okay, let's give an example. What's your favorite food? What's your favorite food? For me, hands down, pizza. I love pizza. I could literally eat pizza all day long. I could never eat anything other than pizza and I'd be happy. We found a great pizza shop on Jaffa Road. Oh my gosh. Pesto pizza was delicious. Can't wait to take everybody there. And so I love pizza. I love pizza. Now I could eat pizza all day long. Think about what your favorite food is. What if I said to you, look, I want to offer you a really, really meaningful, deep, lifelong friendship with somebody. Okay, it's going to be a powerful, meaningful, lifelong soul sister, soul brother type of relationship that's going to carry with you to the very last moment of your life. It's going to be a wonderful relationship that you're going to cherish every day of your life. But in order for you to have it, you have to give up pizza, or give up lamb chops, or give up mandel bread, or whatever it is. Not Brenda's mandel bread. I don't know if mandel bread. Okay, you got to give up something, mandel bread, whatever it is. Okay? You're going to do it? You're going to give it up? Think about your favorite food that you love more than anything in the world. You'll never, ever, ever be able to taste it again. But in exchange, I'm going to give you a lifelong friendship that is going to build and grow and be one of the most meaningful relationships in your life for the rest of your life. Is there anybody here that would choose their favorite food over the relationship? No, of course not, because not all pleasures are created equally. And the pleasure of your favorite food, as much as it is a real pleasure, it doesn't compare. There's no exchange rate for the pleasure of a deep, meaningful, lifelong relationship. Okay, so not all pleasures are created equally. And if there is an opportunity for infinite pleasure again being defined as a relationship with the infinite source of pleasure, and a relationship with Hashem being plugged in, okay, then that infinite pleasure is worth paying anything for. Okay, there is no finite price that is not worth paying for infinite pleasure. So that's what the Ramchal says. We're here for a pleasure. Hashem created us for pleasure, but not just any old pleasure, but for the pleasure, the ultimate pleasure of taking delight in Hashem and benefiting from the radiance of His Shekhinah, of the divine presence. That is the ultimate pleasure that we're here for. Now, I just, at the risk of sounding, repetitive, I always like to point out that something that I'm sure you've heard me say many, many times if you've been coming to classes over the years, that there are other things about, when you think about Hashem in terms of a relationship, things become very clear. You get more clarity. You understand things better. For example, one thing we know about our relationships with other people in our lives, is that relationships are not all or nothing. They're not all or nothing, right? A relationship is not all or nothing, and nor is my relationship with Hashem all or nothing. It's not like, okay, some people have a relationship with God and some people don't. Not how it works. It's varying degrees. It's varying degrees of relationship. And that level of relationship can change anytime. Another thing that we know about relationships is that a relationship is only as strong as the one who wants it least. So if there are two people involved in a relationship and one person is overwhelmingly excited about the relationship and another person is only sort of lukewarm about that relationship, it's the lukewarm person's level of interest that's going to define the quality of the relationship at any point. So in a relationship between two people, whoever's less interested in the relationship, that's going to define the quality of the relationship. Therefore, in a relationship with the infinite source of existence, in a relationship with God, by definition, who's the one less interested in the relationship? We are, by definition, the one less interested in the relationship. And therefore, it's always going to be our level of interest, our level and willingness to invest in the relationship that's going to define the quality of that relationship at any given point. Okay, so these are the important things that we need to understand. These are the things that Rabbi Noach Weinberg taught me 27 years ago and still stick with me every single day of my life. Okay, so we're here for pleasure. Now, let me just ask a question. Maybe we'll take 5 minutes and make this a little discussion, because sometimes I just feel like I'm talking to a computer. Question is, I'll tell you the question, and then we can maybe hear some input on this. The question is, this sounds a little self-serving, doesn't it? Like, really? My whole purpose in Judaism, the whole purpose of my existence, the reason why I'm here is to get pleasure? Doesn't that sound like a little bit, don't we learn in Pirkei Avot, in the Ethics of Our Fathers? Oh, by the way, it's a good chance to plug Ali's class tomorrow, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers at noon. Don't we learn in Pirkei Avot that a person should not serve Hashem in order to receive reward? They should just serve Hashem because it's the right thing to do, not for the purpose of receiving reward. But here the Ramchal seems to be telling us, hey guys, it's about you getting what have you done for me lately? Hashem, pleasure. And by the way, doesn't that also mean that if I'm not getting pleasure, then I don't have to do it? If the whole reason why I'm doing it is to get pleasure, well, let's say I'm not getting so much pleasure out of Shabbos these days. It's not so exciting anymore. So then I'll stop, because I'm here to get pleasure. And if I'm not getting pleasure, then I'll stop doing it. So what's going on over here? What's going on over here? Let's hear from everybody. Anyone want to share something on this? You just have to unmute if you do. So if someone in the center wants to share, they have to.
I think that it comes down to, as you said earlier, what is pleasure? What are you talking about? Because it's not. Sometimes hard things are also a pleasure if you accomplish them in the end.
Okay, good. That's a good point. But still, I agree with you, and I think that obviously makes a big difference. But I still feel like there's a quality or an element of selfishness over here, in the sense of, is this all really about me getting what I want? Is that why I do this? Is that why I'm doing the Jewish thing? Is that why I'm keeping kosher or praying or keeping Shabbos, because I'm going to get some pleasure out of it? That it seems to me a little.
I think it comes down to what you said in the beginning. This is a way for us to work out what am I supposed to accomplish? Maybe.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay. Was that? I can't see who that is. Is that Les?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly, actually. Yeah.
I agree with this lady. It has to do with the definition of pleasure, because pleasure has levels of intensity. And when we normally use the word pleasure, we are trained to think in terms of ourselves as an endpoint. But the fact is, the creator of the architecture of what it is to be human built into us the capacity to have sublime pleasure, which is not on the road that takes us to ourselves as being the center. So we're given an instruction that we have the potential. And by the way, that's another part of pleasure, the sense of individually doing something, initiating something that's responsible for the achievement of that endpoint. He didn't have to create us that way. He could have given us without the effort. But free will is the gift that allows us to freely choose to make choices so that the endpoint, the consequence, can be felt as a product of our own effort. And therein lies the opportunity to maximize a sense of pleasure, of purposefulness.
Okay, very good. You said a lot there. There was something that you said in the beginning which resonated, which was the notion of sublime pleasure. If you understand pleasure on the highest level, it's not really what we normally associate with pleasure. We normally associate pleasure as a taking, as an exercise in taking. But the truth is that the highest pleasure, the most sublime pleasures, don't look. The person doing it does not look like he's taking. It looks like he's giving. In fact, we just learned that in this week's parsha from Abraham, right? That the most sublime pleasure, the pleasure of imitating God and being like God and taking care of other people and not being on the receiving end. So I think that's a very good point.
Can I give an example that comes to mind? I've thought of this often. One of the most difficult experiences in life is sharing the loss of somebody when somebody passes away. When you are in the presence of the people that are feeling that loss, with a sense that you are actually offering them some level of comfort, that qualifies, I think, as almost a sublime pleasure for the person who's offering.
Okay, but this in a bit of a way that highlights my question, which is, why do I go? If it's about pleasure, then am I going to support that person, to take care of that person in their time of need and loneliness because I get some pleasure out of it, right? In other words, can that not then become self-serving again in a sense? Yeah, hi Mimi, yeah.
I think you get tangled up with definitions because you're starting from that same position of using the concept of pleasure in the normal way that we use it. But really what we're talking about is something that goes beyond simply satisfying an urge or a desire that we have individually.
Okay.
I think
pleasure would be where Reuben is right now. That's what I think pleasure would be. With a big palm tree in the background. That looks like pleasure to me. That looks like Florida pleasure. Okay, sorry. Okay, Mimi, go ahead.
So to me, it's more about.
Wait, we can't really hear you, Mimi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm thinking it's more about completing a circuit. So the pleasure comes from a feeling of completeness. So when you have this relationship with Hashem, it's almost like in physics, one part needs the other part to be complete. And that's an ultimate sublime pleasure.
Okay. Okay, I agree with everything everybody's saying. But I still have my question. Because my question still is there in the sense that what's the motivation? Let me take a step back. I'll share with you a concept. I wanted to explain this concept. There's a concept in Judaism called doing something lishma and doing something shelo lishma. It means like this. Doing something lishma means doing something for the shem shemayim, for the purpose of, so to speak, for the purpose of heaven, for the right reason. And then there's doing something shelo lishma, which is doing something good, but not necessarily for the highest reason. I'll give you a classic example. Somebody donates, $100,000 to L'chaim Center. Okay, great. Hey, look, no one's going to discourage that. But what's motivating you? Is it having your name up on top of the sanctuary, the Schwartz family, whatever, sanctuary, and that's what's motivating you. That's what's driving you. And that's why you're giving the money. And if it is, that's fine. Don't worry. I have no problem with it. But is that what's driving you and motivating you? Okay, maybe. Or maybe you give it anonymously because what's motivating and driving you is helping doing the mitzvah, doing it for the right reasons, right? So there's a continuum. There's doing something good for the right highest reason, and then there's doing something good for a lower, more self-serving reason. Now, is doing something shelo lishma, not for the highest reason, is that bad? The answer to that is no, not at all. Think about children. Think about how we educate our children to do mitzvahs. You think any kid wakes up when he's like 9 and says, I really feel like going to shul and sitting there quietly for 3 hours and praying and saying a bunch of words that I don't know what it means. And, I also really feel like, not eating what I want to eat. No, That's not how. And learning Torah 8 hours a day. No, that's kids are kids. People are people. People are hardwired to seek pleasure. So what do you do with a kid? You bribe them, basically. You motivate them to go to shul initially with some ulterior motivation, whatever it is. That's why there's always a candy person in shul who gives out candy to the kids. So the kids, when they're young, they look forward to it. They want to come because they want to get a candy or whatever, and the candy just becomes more expensive toys or whatever you need to do to motivate the kids to do what they need to do. That's called lo lishma. And the Talmud says that that's perfectly fine at first. At first, that's a perfectly fine way to motivate somebody towards a higher level. But ultimately, the ultimate goal is to be able to do the things, learn the Torah and daven, not because you're getting something out of it, but because you understand that it's the ultimate connection to Hashem. So this is what I think what the Ramchal is explaining to us over here is that, in the physical world, when you want to connect two things together, let's say you have 2 blocks of wood and you want to connect, or 2 pieces of plastic and you want to unify them, unite them into one. You need something to stick them together, whether it's Gorilla Glue or zip ties or something to take these 2 individual things and connect them and make them touch and connect. So the same thing is true in spirituality. If I want to connect my soul to its source, to Hashem, I need some zip ties or some Gorilla Glue. What is the Gorilla Glue in Judaism that connects me, my soul, to Hashem? The answer to that is pleasure. Pleasure. That's the role of pleasure. Hashem made Judaism pleasurable. Shabbos, right? Shabbos is geschmack. Who doesn't want to sit around for 25 hours, eat cholents, hang out with friends, drink some l'chaims, eat herring, of course, sing songs, learn it, talk about have interesting conversations. That's what Shabbos is about. Why? Because that pleasure in the mitzvos, in doing the mitzvahs, is what is connecting me and bonding me to Hashem. So the same thing is true over here. The goal, the purpose ultimately is what we call devekus. It's being one with Hashem. It's having spiritual connection. That's the goal. The goal is to ultimately be there. But how do we get there? We get there through pleasure. Okay, so that's what I think. That's the idea over here that I think is important. The ultimate pleasure that we're seeking over here is devekus with Hashem. I want to go to continue a little bit further with the next sentence over here. So we said that the sages of blessed memory have taught us that the mankind was created only to delight in Hashem and to benefit from the radiance of His Shekhinah. And for this is the Ta'anug Amiti. This is the true pleasure in life. The true ultimate pleasure in life is delighting in Hashem and benefiting from the radiance of the Shekhinah. We all seek pleasure. Everybody seeks pleasure. We're hardwired that way. Every choice that we make in our lives is a choice about what's going to give me more pleasure. Right? And I know you might be thinking, well, that's not really true, because if that were the case, then why would I ever eat whole wheat bread? Or why would I ever eat, kale? Or why would I ever exercise? And the answer to that is because the pleasure of being healthy or the pleasure of being thin or fit or whatever is greater to you than the pleasure of eating things that taste good. Why do I pay my taxes? Because the pleasure of staying out of jail is greater than the pleasure of having that money in my bank account. Okay? Why do people study for exams? Why do students study for exams when their friends are going out and partying? Because the pleasure of passing my exams and getting good grades is greater than the pleasure of going out and drinking with my friends. So everything we do in life is about seeking pleasure. And the goal in Judaism is threefold. Simple. 1, recognize that not all pleasures are created equally. 2, identify the higher pleasures and the lower pleasures. The higher pleasures being those pleasures that are going to connect me spiritually and create a deeper bond and a deeper relationship with my Creator And the lower pleasures being those pleasures which are going to taste good or offer some kind of physical benefit or physical material benefit now, but are ultimately going to pull me away or take me away from my purpose and my meaning in life. Okay, so I have to identify the higher pleasures and the lower pleasures, and they're not always so easy to identify because the lower pleasures masquerade as higher pleasures, and the higher pleasures are elusive because they're spiritual pleasures. So I have to recognize that not all pleasures are created equally. I have to identify the higher pleasures and the lower pleasures, and then this is the hard part. I have to be willing to sacrifice and choose to sacrifice the lower level pleasures that are available to me right now in a very immediate and gratifying way for the higher levels of pleasure, which are not going to provide me with the same degree of immediate satisfaction, but are ultimately going to allow me to reach my purpose. And that's what life is all about. That's what maturity is. If you think about what maturity is, the difference between a mature person and an immature person, and by the way, we all know immature people, it's not a factor of age. We know people in their 30s and 40s and 50s that are immature, and we know kids that are 8, 10, 15 that are quite mature. What's the difference? A mature person has the ability to recognize that not all pleasures are created equally, to identify higher and lower pleasures, and to be able to sacrifice lower level pleasures that are available now for higher level pleasures that are available only somewhere down the road. Which is why a child, when you ask a 4-year-old, what would you rather have right now? What would you rather have? A chocolate bar right now or a bicycle on your 5th birthday? A lot of them will choose the chocolate bar right now because they're 4 and they're not mature and they're not expected to be mature. But as we grow older, hopefully we realize that it's worth it to give up the chocolate bar now for the bike on the birthday. That's what maturity is, and that's the goal. And that's what Hashem wants us to do, is to be mature people who recognize that there are lower pleasures and higher pleasures, and to go for the higher levels of pleasure and to sacrifice the lower levels of pleasure. Okay? And that's what Judaism is all about. Think about it. Kashrus, for example, kosher. It's a perfect example, right? Because there's a lower level pleasure. The lower level pleasure is being able to eat whatever I want to eat it, wherever I want to eat it, whenever I want to eat it. And, food is one of the great pleasures in life. And sometimes, you may have had something fleishik, and then, you went out for hamburgers or whatever, and then your friends call you and they're all going out for ice cream, and it hasn't been 6 hours or 3 hours or whatever you wait, and you have to make a choice. Kashrus, keeping kosher, is a constant battle, a constant struggle between choosing the pleasure that's right here, right now, the food that I want to eat right now, that might not be kosher, versus recognizing that I have a soul, and my soul, in order for my soul to be healthy and to function and to operate to its full capacity and to achieve what it's meant to achieve, which is spiritual connection, it has to be healthy. And I have to follow the laws of kashrus for my soul to have that power and to be healthy in that way. And I may have to give up some kind of physical pleasure, something that's going to taste really good right now, for the greater level of pleasure of keeping my soul pure and healthy so that it can achieve and accomplish what it needs to do. So that's what Judaism is all about. It's about the lower level pleasures and the higher level pleasures, and being able to sacrifice one for the other. I'm going to go for like maybe 7, 8 more minutes, and then we'll stop and take some questions.
David?
Yeah.
There's higher pleasures, lower pleasures. What about the middle pleasures? Meaning, if you're a person who is really doing the man-to-man part really well, taking care of others, giving to others, caring for others, whatever your motive, but you're caring for people man-to-man, wouldn't that be a pathway to better relationship with Hashem?
Definitely. Absolutely. And that goes back to the idea that it's not all or nothing, and you don't always have to be choosing the higher level pleasures. And it's a lifelong process. It's a lifelong journey. But the ultimate goal is to be able to identify those higher pleasures and to be moving in that direction, consistently moving in that direction. And there are many pleasures, and all the mitzvahs. I mean, the man-to-man, mitzvahs. You identify those as being easier. Well, that for you they might be easier. For other people, they might be harder. For some people, you might say, look, give me kosher, give me Shabbos. Just don't make me have to give tzedakah, give away my hard-earned money, or don't force me to go have to visit somebody in the hospital, or whatever it is. So it's different for everybody. So as human beings, sorry,
They're not easy for me.
no,
David,
I mean,
I'm also thinking that basically what you're saying when you're talking about maturity is the work you do on yourself to develop a higher level of sensitivity to be able to distinguish between those different levels. So it
Yeah.
doesn't occur without an instruction manual and without practice and consistency.
Yep. Discipline, consistency, day in, day out, the hard work, and it's growth. It's growth. Okay, so just to recap that idea. So the idea basically is that, for human beings, us human beings, the question is not whether we're going to pursue pleasure or not. We are going to pursue pleasure. That's what we do. That's how we're built. That's how we're hardwired. That's not bad. That's good. That's who we are. Not whether or not I'm going to seek pleasure. The question is, where am I going to choose to seek my pleasure? How am I going to define pleasure in life? And I need to decide for myself. Am I going to go for the lower pleasures or the higher pleasures? But know, the Ramchal is going to explain, he's going to develop this idea further, know that the pursuit of the lower level pleasures, if that's where you're at, and that's what you're about, and that's what you're going for, they're going to leave you hungry. They're going to leave you unfulfilled. They're going to leave you unsatisfied. And the higher level pleasures are going to elevate you and fulfill you, but it's not easy. I want to just share with you, Dr. Abraham Tversky wrote one of his 80 books or whatever. He wrote a book, a really, really lovely book, which I recommend. I like it a lot. It's called Happiness in the Human Spirit. And it's a book about being happy and about, being your best self and how to be fulfilled in life. And in the beginning, he talks about this thing, which is so amazing. He coins this syndrome. He calls it the SDS, Spiritual Deficiency Syndrome. Spiritual Deficiency Syndrome. I'm reading you a quote from his book, from the beginning of his book right now. He says, recognize, this is Rabbi Dr. Abraham Tversky writing here, recognize that you have a body and a spirit. If your body lacks something, let's say iron, you develop iron deficiency, anemia. You'll go to the doctor and he'll prescribe supplements. If he gives you extra vitamin A, it won't help. It has to be iron. It's the same with spiritual deficiency syndrome. If you try to cure it by amassing wealth, going for a cruise, taking a drink, taking another drink, you'll feel better for a while, but you won't be happy. One of the beauties of being human is that we can realize we've made a mistake. Once we realize that we've been undermining our own spirituality, we see that we've been using the wrong things to fill the wrong void. So spiritual deficiency syndrome means that a person, he sums it up over here also. He says, he gives an example that one of the ways that we deal with spiritual deficiency syndrome is preoccupation with the physical. We often attempt to fill our inner spiritual voids with more and more things that we don't actually need, which ultimately deepen the emptiness we feel within. We may try to alleviate that emptiness with overeating, surfing the internet, binge watching movies, but the temporary relief is always followed by disappointment because we are not feeding our souls what they really need. Spiritual deficiency syndrome is in some ways a gift, he says. It's our soul telling us that it's hungry and it needs to be fed, not with empty calories, but with genuine meaning and purpose that fills our inner void. And he ends it, he says, each of us has an infinite core filled with light that we yearn to pour into the world around us. When we ignore that light, we feel the emptiness and try desperately to fill it. Fill the soul with what it really needs: purpose, connection, and meaning. Okay, so that's this idea of spiritual deficiency syndrome, and that's really what the Ramchal is telling us over here, is that if we want to know and understand what life is really all about, it's really about the highest levels of pleasure, which is the relationship and the connection to Hashem. Question is, should we go on to one more point, or should we stop here and have a little discussion? I think maybe there's a good place to stop, so we can, anyone, the way I want to kind of handle this is that we'll do like 45 minutes of the text, and then at the end, we'll leave 10 minutes or so for conversation. And at that point, anyone who feels like they want to jump off is more than welcome to, but anybody who wants to stay on can. Linda wants to know the name of the book. If you mean the Rabbi Twersky book, so the name of that book is Happiness and the Human Spirit. And if you mean the book that we're studying here together, it's The Path of the Just. I think you probably meant the Rabbi Twersky book, Linda. So that is Happiness in the Human Spirit. Okay. Marilyn, you wanted to, I think you had your hand up there.
Earlier on, you asked, is this all selfish? And it seems to me, well, first of all, we need to define what Judaism calls selfishness, because it seems to me, especially for this book, our point of view is you shouldn't be selfish. But spiritually,
I'm being selfish. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
Hold on, I just want somebody to say hi over here for 1 second.
Yeah.
Come say a quick hello.
I'm running out, but hi guys.
hi.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Hey, hey.
All right.
How are you?
Bye guys. Nice to see you.
So
We had a
I
couple
just,
hours with Talia today. It was special.
I'm thinking that, being selfish is not a bad thing, from a Jewish point of view, especially if you're trying to elevate your spiritual, your spiritual self. So we need to know that. And I see, for example, a proof that you're supposed to be selfish, or from the positive point of view is, for example, if you give tzedakah, you think, oh, I'm giving the tzedakah, I'm helping out, blah, blah, blah. But in actual fact, you get the most pleasure. You get pleasure even more than doing whatever it is that you're doing. So I really would like to have a clear definition of selfishness and spirituality. And the other thing, it seems to me, is that, and this is what this book is what is your why? Because if we know our why, and I sure don't know what mine is, but if I knew that, then I would be happy to do the toil and to do the work. And again, using Twersky's thing about, if you're eating the wrong thing, you're eating pizza and you're eating bread and you're eating all those yummy, delicious things. But all day long, you're feeling hungry because you've got no nutrition in you. And if you can, and it's the same thing, I'm sure, with the spirituality. If we can find those things that we need, we will be more satisfied and more fulfilled. And so, yeah, back to selfishness. I want to know what we are talking about exactly when we talk about selfishness.
That's a very good question. And I think, as far as selfishness goes, again, the point that I've been making this morning, or this evening, depending where you are, is that everything we do, in a certain sense, everything we do is self-motivated. That's how we're built. There's no real way around that. And even when you do something, altruistic, it's not 100% altruistic, because there's an element of doing it because it makes you feel good. You feel satisfied and fulfilled by doing something altruistic. So, I guess the definition of selfish versus not selfish would be, why am I doing it? Why am I doing it? Am I doing it because I want to get something out of it? Am I doing it because it's going to benefit me in some way? Or am I doing it because, it's the right thing to do. It's the godly thing to do. I'm trying to be like God in this world. I'm trying to imitate God. That's what Judaism is all about. And the fact that it makes me feel better and makes me feel good, it makes me feel fulfilled is a wonderful thing. But what's motivating me? What's truly motivating me?
But does it even matter? Because if you are doing it because it makes you feel good, just like the lollipop for the kids in school, you'll do more and more of it. So what? And eventually maybe
Well,
you'll get to a higher level.
What if it stops making me feel good? What if it no longer makes me feel good to give tzedakah? So then if the only reason why I do
You
it,
have to do it anyway because it said that you must
okay,
do it.
so that's where it gets a little sketchy. If you know, if what motivates me to do it is what's in it for me, then when there's no longer something in it for me, I'll stop doing it. So we need to try to get to a level where what's motivating us is our neshama understands that it's the right thing to do. And the fact that there's something benefiting us is a wonderful thing. But it's like a relationship, well, whatever. It's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I hear what you're saying though. It's interesting. And he's going to talk about it more too. So we'll see as we go along.
I think it has something to do with commitment. You have to choose your commitment carefully and then understand what you committed to and discover as you go along what's necessary to keep that commitment going. So even if things go bluey in the relationship or something, you still have the commitment that's more important than what the particular thing is at any given time.
Yeah, that's a great point. And using a relationship as an example is very helpful there, because if you think about a husband and wife, let's say, who made a commitment to each other, if that commitment is real and it's true, then if something changes, if something, God forbid, if the spouse becomes ill or becomes difficult for whatever reason or loses capacity, your commitment is still complete and total, and you'll stay committed to that person, like many people in this group did and have. And but if you're not committed, then as soon as it becomes difficult or uncomfortable, you're out, and that's not truly a relationship. The same thing is true with Hashem also in that relationship. If I'm fully committed and fully bought in, now it starts with intellectually understanding why and internalizing and getting to the point where I am fully committed. But then once I'm fully committed, if I wake up in the morning, I don't feel like putting on my tefillin, I'm going to put it on anyway because I've committed. I'm committed in that way. Yeah, very good. That's a good point. Julie.
Yes, for me, it's about long-term gratification. I mean, I am thinking way in the future of my afterlife, I guess. I mean, I'm not just thinking the here and now. I'm thinking what's going to help me later in life or
Amazing.
help my loved ones after I'm
I'm
gone.
going to read you the next sentence, which we're going to focus on next week, okay? It said the next sentence is the true place for this greatest pleasure is the world to come. But that is the world that was created with this design for necessary for this purpose. So you're exactly right. Julie's hitting it exactly right. And that's the direction that he's gonna go. But then there's a question of is there spiritual pleasure in this world, or is there only spiritual pleasure in the next world? Which is a question that we'll talk about next week. But yeah, excellent, Julie. That's right. It's a long game. You're in it for the long game. Are you in it for the short game or are you in it for the long game? Right? And the long game could be the very long game. It can be like the eternal long game. Excellent. What about you, Tracy? What do you think?
Hi, good morning, David.
What's going on?
I love it. I do. I love everything that you're saying. I truly feel that thinking about like short term and long term, I'm trying to put myself in a position in life now at this point with so much, joy and so much loss and sadness and good things and whatever. I'm trying to think more long term. So doing things for long term rather than short term. Of course, I love to go shopping and buy more things, right? Who doesn't love to go shopping? Me and my Allie, I miss her. So we could go shopping together. But I'm trying to think of long term.
Do you know how much money I'm saving now that she's not hanging out with you?
I know it's very upsetting for me, but I'm trying to think long term so I can get my plane ticket to come to Jerusalem. So, right? That's a long term goal.
That is.
Less shopping, go to Israel to be with David and Allie. long-term goals. So that's what I'm
love it.
trying to truly think about is what's going to bring me more happiness long-term rather than short-term.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's
And
beautiful.
being
Really
sitting
is.
with you outside at sunset to then go inside and have dinner. That's what I'm like waiting.
And wine, lots of wine.
I can't wait. Oh, God. Beautiful, Dave.
Awesome. Well, I can't think of a better way to end than that. So maybe we should call it a day. Okay, wonderful. Make sure to take advantage of all the great classes this week. And we will see everybody very soon. Please God.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Love
Okay.
you.
Love
Miss
you
you.
guys. Have a great day. Take care.
Thank you, Rabbi.